Have you found yourself wondering, is there something more? If so, then you, my friend, are a dreamer in waiting. I'd like to welcome you to the Dream On podcast. I'm Julia Gentry, and along with my husband, Travis Gentry, we discuss real, raw, and not small talk conversations about faith, family, entrepreneurship, and all the things that matter most in this life in order to help people bridge the gap between what they currently have and what they really want most. Join us as we give you insights, tools, and strategy to chase every dream that's on the inside of you. But be forewarned, this podcast is not for the faint of heart, but rather those of heart. This is the Dream On podcast.
Welcome to the Dream On podcast. I am Travis Gentry.
And I'm Julia Gentry.
And welcome to the episode
that has been in the works
for a while. We are back. We took a little break. We moved across country and we're back.
We had another baby. No, actually,
we've done podcasts since then.
We should stack.
We have 7 babies now.
I just want to stack all the reasons that we have not showed up on this podcast to make it a bigger reason as to why we did, all the excuses that you're maybe if I have more excuses to justify the reason that we haven't done this in 7 months, then it will make sense for us not doing it.
And it's always excuses.
It's always excuses. And I didn't even come prepared. I should have had my list of all the excuses and reasons and justifications, and I just don't.
We haven't done it, but we're back.
We're back.
And we're excited to be back.
I'm excited.
And we're going to talk a little bit about our move.
A little bit about our move. And we're actually going to not only talk about our move, but we want to discuss today what it looks like just to embrace change in general. I think that depending upon how you look at change, either the end is near or the beginning is next, or, you're letting go of one thing or you're grabbing onto another, and there's just a lot of, I think, ideas and thoughts around change.
Mm-hmm.
And so Travis and I are just going to kind of give you an upfront row seat into our change and what's gone on, and hopefully encourage you in your change.
Yes. When you say change to me, what I always think of is identity.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big part of it. So whether you're changing and living in a new state or you're changing careers, you're letting go of your identity.
Mm.
And so that's harder.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just dive right in.
I was going to,
let's just go deep quick.
I was going to say, what's so funny though, is I actually just did a growth coaching session with someone yesterday. And I said, where do you want to jump in? And he says, I want to talk about change. And so I was like, oh, okay. And he goes, I hate it. I don't want to do it. Right out of the gate. So it's so funny. I think I'm also a little bit of, I didn't think you were jumping in the deep end, but already same word, 2 totally different interpretations. You're
Mm-hmm.
talking about identity. He's talking about hating it because he has to leave his comfort zone. And so I think that one word has so much meaning behind it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also leaving one thing that you feel competent and good at, and then jumping into something that you're not. Typically,
Mm-hmm.
that's change.
Yeah.
So whether you're not working out and then you start working out, or you change from working out in one style and then go to another style, you just you go backwards a little bit before you can go forwards.
So when you hear the word change, the first thing that really pops up in your mind is identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Has that always been the case, or is that would you say that's a new narrative or a new connection of those words?
Well, I think for us, we tend to do big change, from moving from one state to the next, from changing one.
By the way, Florida to Oregon, Oregon to Arkansas. This isn't let's go down the street and just.
Well, I remember when we were saying that, it's funny going back, and I remember dying laughing about us moving to Arkansas and Bentonville, Arkansas. And so we'll have to get to kind of the experience that we've had so far. And, but yes, I think for me, it's because I've had a few big changes, and one recently in the last year and a half that I've really committed to. And so it's my identity. So when I talk to people, when I introduce myself, I'm going back of here's what I do. And then I'm that's actually, I don't do that anymore.
You're who
and
am
then
I?
I'm practicing.
Who am I?
Yeah, practicing what I do. And then I'm do I do this? Am I actually this is who I am now?
People are Travis? Travis? You're oh, are you talking to me? Are you talking to me right now? That's so funny though, because I think, and I really actually want to dive in just because I've gotten, I've been so close to you in that changing process. So I know all the gaps to fill there. But before we go there, I was thinking about that word when we were considering this podcast, and I was thinking of the word change. And for me and my personality, the reason that I love that word is it always ignites this idea of challenge. Like I connect the word change with challenge, and I really love being challenged, to the point that prior to this podcast, I sent my husband a text message that was like, I have too many things on my plate and I'm wrestling with all of the things and not doing any of them well. And yet they were all areas that I was ready for a new challenge. I was ready for a new change. And so I'm not saying that that's always hard or not messy, but that's what I connect change with, is always that there's going to be some sort of challenge with it.
Oh, that's so interesting. So if you're listening to this podcast, think about what it means to you. Because that is true. I didn't realize that the interpretation could mean something to so many, like everybody has their own interpretation of what that means.
Well, and I think
and the word they put behind it, then the meaning they put behind it. And then it's like, what's the thing under the thing? Why I identify that as. That's interesting.
It's 100. Well, and it's so funny because you and I could have talked about this whole entire podcast, which thank God that we didn't just carry on our own narratives of what it was, because we could still be actually talking about the same exact word, but so many people have different narratives around that word that then you look around and wonder why nobody is changing, or some people do and some people don't, or why you thought this podcast was going to be great. And I was like totally taken aback. It's because we all just had same word, totally different interpretations around it. So our pursuit of it could look very different.
That's so good. If you think about that, like how words, and we talk about this all the time, but for some reason it's really hitting me right now. So when you're in a conversation with someone or your spouse, you need to ask them what their interpretation is before you start going down the path, because it can mean so many different things.
So catch this real time. Travis and I we're just having dinner, and I'm like, I'm ready for a change. And instantly his identity is shifting.
What identity are you wanting to shift?
So like here, and then let's just use our kids for the sake of the exercise. Malachi's like, no, I hate it. I don't want to change again. I think of it as a new challenge. Nixon thinks it's fun. Azzy's like going to avoid it at all costs. It's the same word. Like I've actually put no other descriptions around it. You don't know if I'm changing dinner. Yeah. You don't know if I'm changing my pants. You don't know if I'm changing our house. Like you don't actually know what I'm changing. But the idea of even that one word in the same family all has 7 different interpretations. And then we wonder why at the end of the conversation, everybody's on a different page.
Totally. Well, and you think about that. And so when you're talking to your team or you're talking to Cammie and you're talking about change, maybe ask them, what does change mean to you? Before you start just going in there, because change could mean like this little tweak, or we're going to stop doing this and start doing this little thing, or we're just going to stop doing this. And so I think change can mean something that is more impactful, more powerful to different people.
Yeah, which is interesting. So you know what I'm going to do? Let's just actually Google. I know I always say the more you Google, less you know. Let's look at the definition of the word change. So by definition, it means make different, alter, modify, replace with something else, especially something of the same kind that is newer or better. So in theory, again, it has no meaning except for the emotional interpretation that we give it. Right. And then I think if we lean towards your direction of anyone's direction, change is going to cause a new identity. Change is going to be a challenge. Change is going to be exciting. Change is going to be hard. Change is going to make you get outside of your comfort zone. Like at the same level, what's also interesting is that it also can embody like the results that everybody is wanting or afraid of all at the same time. And that now starts to probably explain why we have a propensity to either want to do it or not want to do it.
So why do you feel like the word change just means like a new challenge?
Yeah. So it's so fun. And just to loop people back in. So if you didn't listen to the last couple of episodes of last season, which again, we apologize, was months ago, Travis and I took you on this journey for like a year and a half. We had this incredible podcast. We were doing all the things with you up close and personal, inviting you into just our lives around dreaming and sobriety. And we're launching businesses, and we moved to Bend, Oregon. And then we dropped this bomb that we're moving to Arkansas. We moved to Arkansas and the show ends. And we don't even tell you. Like, you don't know if we died. You don't know if we got to Arkansas.
Did we do? Maybe we did one or two.
Sorry, you guys.
No?
We're so
We
sorry.
just stopped.
We just stopped. You know,
It's
the
Arkansas.
first hardest day is the day that you start the podcast. The second hardest day is the day that you want to quit, you know? So, but it's interesting because I think when I look back, so moving to Bentonville for me, I actually think I actually have a lot of thoughts around this.
I know. And we
Oh,
only have so much time.
So much time to explain this all. So I'm going to try to take all of the reasons that I've like started to uncover in these last 7 months for me of just truly doing some soul searching around why did I move? Why did I make this change? Though, I mean, some incredible things have come of it. Like, I really don't think it's right or wrong. You know, like I have found this little place within me that when I don't feel challenged, I either completely change directions to make something challenging that doesn't need to be challenging. Like, I fear boredom, you know, I fear monotony. And I think at some level that's good, right? Like, because if we're not growing, we're dying. And, but I also fear that my desire for change and challenge takes away from the intimacy of the moment, the intimacy of the journey, you know, like just enjoy the ride. Because I'm so used to the ride being a challenge, and it evokes this like intensity and adrenaline, and like I can do hard things. And like there's this piece of my personality that like likes to conquer and do things. But the minute it's not challenging, I start to feel like I'm not in control. I'm bored. It's not good enough. I need to be doing something more significant. And like that adrenaline start. And I've learned that I've actually struggled in the journey process. Like, just the like joy is in the journey. Like, the process is where the magic happens. Like, intimacy is built on the sidelines. It's not always in the heat of the game. And I think that that's an area that I've just really been letting God look at and highlight to me is, yes, create. I'm a creator, but don't change just for the sake of change or making it hard or tripping me up, because it's keeping me from what I want most, which is just connection and significance. So welcome to my journal, the last 7 months.
I think we could talk a lot more about that. I think there's so many levels to that. And even the text that you sent me is, I think you do get bored and you mix things up, and then you change things and you add, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, because what I've learned and what I've seen through successful entrepreneurs or successful people, whether it's, you know, health and fitness, or it's the boring, like staying consistent brick by brick. And then, you know, in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, you look back and you're like, wow, like I didn't think I was making as much progress as I was. And most entrepreneurs, even talking to some this last weekend at your event, it's amazing. Like, people want to have a bunch of things going on.
Yeah.
As opposed to being great and staying in that, because once you start to get good at something, it does get kind of boring. But then that's when, if you want to be a master at something, that's what you have to do, is you have to stay consistent at that same thing for 10,000 hours. We were just talking about that with Malachi. If you want to master something, it's not about like doing a bunch and adding a bunch of different things. It's about doing that one thing to the absolute best of your ability.
So my question to you would be, how do you know the difference between the type of boredom that's developing excellence and boredom that's developing apathy? Right? Because if you look at that word again, boredom could be, well, I could be bored because I'm just getting my reps in. So I'm doing this push-up a million times, right? And yet we know that the way to get good at it is you got to push yourself out of the comfort zone. But how do you know? But you're like, I've done these reps so many times that How do you know that that is developing excellence versus apathy? Because what's interesting, if I were to flip this last 7 months and look at the other side of it, being here has caused such a refining in my heart that I've seen myself as a visionary in ways that I've never seen myself before. I'm building a team underneath me to do, I have now 4 people underneath me that I was doing all of their jobs. So now I have 4 people doing the one job that I have before. And so it's created this refining of our process. So as a company, we're able to do more. I'm doing, I'm caring more about less in my lane, but the refining process of letting go and trusting and delegating, like that's been brutal. Like the emotional connection to all of those things for me has been such a challenge that I find myself still every once in a while mentally or emotionally or spiritually holding on to things that aren't mine to hold on to anymore. And so in a weird way, the challenge is good because it forces me to grow, and we have grown by leaps and bounds. But then in a really weird way, it's like I don't want it to take away from enjoying the journey too. But I don't know the difference between one that's leaning into excellence and one that would be leaning into apathy.
I don't think I'm fully understanding based off of that example. Because I think it's different in different areas of your life. Like health, like fitness, working out is different, or food, consistently eating the same things or whatever, like is different than business and what you're talking about. So help me to understand. So you've added the team and you're stepping into this visionary role and allowing other people to help you. What are you getting bored in then?
No, I'm saying I'm talking more generally speaking of like, how do you, when you say, okay, now to be great at something, you got to get your 10,000 hours in, which means you got to be consistent day in and day out, day in and day out, day in and day out. How do you know when that consistency? So let me give you an example. So now if I am the visionary and I need to be doing content creation and digital courses, like that's my new lane. And I love it. That's awesome. But then there's at some point that's going to start to feel monotonous, right? Because you're like, I've done 10,000 hours of this, or even if I've done 5,000 hours of this, how do you know when you just need to stay the course and keep doing it for the level of excellence versus when, no, you're actually starting to get a little apathetic and you do need to grow and you do need to push yourself more and you do need to do something different. Like what's that fine line between excellence and apathy?
Well, I think you also need to set like waypoints, like goals. Are you moving closer to those goals? It's like doing, and there again, no expert on doing social media posts, but what I can tell from the people that are successful in it, if you're not getting the views, if you're not getting the traction that you're wanting, it's your content. No one cares about it. And so you got to adjust it to find what are people looking for. So yes, you can put out bad content for 10 years and you're like, see, it doesn't work and I'm bored and I'm doing the same thing. But it's because you weren't understanding like what are people wanting and how do you bring yourself to the table to educate or entertain or whatever you're trying to accomplish with those people. So if you're not gaining viewers, and there's different metrics on how to do that, and you guys are understanding that more and more. It's how long are they watching? How many clicks are you getting? How many likes, subscribes? So if you're growing in that, then you need to keep doing that. And so you got to do A/B testing. You always got to be testing to see, because it's evolving and changing in your audience. And so you're looking at that and saying, okay, this is working really well. This isn't. So let's get rid of this and add something new to A/B test and see, okay, this is working still. This isn't. Or you add one, you're like, wow, this is actually working better than this one.
No, I think that's what it is. So what you're speaking to, I mean, you're getting real micro with it, but I think the concept is, if in order to do things excellent and not to just change for the sake of change, is you've got to be tracking the progress, because in the pursuit of the progress and in the pursuit of what feels boring, when you go, no, it's working, right? Even if it's by 5%, 10%, whatever it is, whether we're talking financially, mentally, emotionally, physically, I think that it's the ability to look at the progress that's happening, which feeds the encouragement of keep going. right? It's working. You might not be, I think for me, it's like, it's not instant gratification, or it needs to be bigger results faster. Or again, I so clearly see the picture, like where I want to be in 5 years, that I shared it to my team 3 months ago. And then I expect us in 3 months to be there subconsciously. Do you know what I'm saying? And so when we're where we need to be from a progress perspective, but I'm so bored because I clearly see the 5-year picture that I'm so bored 3 months in, and I'm like, okay, let's just do something different for the sake of doing something different, as opposed to like, no, you just got to get bored. Like, I clearly see the 5-year goal. Get in and do some push-ups, check your progress. It's going to build, the sustainability and the momentum to stick with it. And so I think that's what I'm learning right now in all of this, is that I need to learn how to get beautifully bored doing the in-between really well, and to check those progress points and not just change for the next high of change.
Yes.
But to test, like, it's working, and those bumps of encouragement and like the sustainable encouragement, I'm learning is more suited for me right now than the let's start a new business, like, because that's a different high that I don't want. But
yeah,
I'm
but even within
that.
your business, you can add and do too many things too fast.
Yeah.
So you have to look at what's working, weed out the things that are not working, and then add something else to test it.
Yeah.
But keep doing the thing that's working.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like McDonald's or, In-N-Out Burger. It's like, they were based out of California. They were crushing it. People would fly in, or, when they went to California, it was like a big deal to go there. Well, they did something so well, and obviously it didn't change. It's the same fries and same burger that they've been doing for years, but now they're expanding throughout the country, and people line up and wait hours to get their burger because they were only offered in California, but now they're offered in Colorado and different states.
Yep.
And so it's like, you have to know that this product or this service that I offer is like, people want it.
Yeah.
And then you can expand it, and you can expand it in different ways. And that's kind of what you're doing. You're doing digital products, you're doing your events. So it's the same concept that's coming out of the book, but now you're testing it to see, how do I get this out into more people's hands and not just rely on me doing it.
Yeah. Which, now throwing it back in your court, talk to me about what is the identity meant to you in change, or why are you connecting those two words?
I think for us, and for me in general, identity has always been a big shift, from no kids to having kids, to not being married to being married, to moving. Like, we have moved multiple times throughout when we lived in Colorado, but we've lived in however many states over the course of the 15 years. We probably lived in, I don't know, 7-8 different actual states. We've traveled the country full time. So we've gone these like big, it's not these little micro. And then same thing with how and what I do. We've started in a few different businesses, and some of them have been totally different businesses, from Intern America, which was a internship placement program, to real estate, to now I'm equity trading. And so my identity of shift, and typically when I do something, I want to go all in, as opposed to, well, I do this and this and this, knowing that for me to be successful in whatever I'm doing, I have to commit myself to that one thing. And so now, going back for my identity in the last year and a half, I've shifted it from real estate investor, which, there again, it still comes up and I can still do it, but I'm full time doing stock trading, equity trading.
Yeah.
And
but in my mind, when you say identity, though, that's not a title. Like, when you're saying, like, I'm a real estate investor, but to me, identity, when I hear that word, that has nothing to do with title. It has to do with, like, identity, who you are.
Well, it's going from something I know so well to something I don't. And so the first question, and this is like, I try not to ask this question to people I first meet.
So welcome. Pretend like you have met Travis more than just one time.
Is not episode. What you do, is who are you?
Can you imagine? That's why people run. That's why people run from us at the playground.
I don't care what you do for a living. I want to know who you are. And so, but that's the leading question. What would you do? And so it's like, oh, I do real estate. And you're like, in the back of my head, I'm like, I don't do real estate anymore. And then you're like practicing this new dialogue. So identity for me has come in, what do I do to make a living? And so that's for me.
So, but let's say
talking
if
to
we
people.
walked into a room and I said, "Oh, hi, I'm Julie," I said, "Who are you?" What would you say? So, like, if you're going to ask someone that
Mhm.
question, and so if I asked you that question, what would you say?
You don't have enough time on this podcast
I
to
do.
know who
I
I
make
am.
the rules. I'm the boss.
I mean, I think if you're just asking me that, I mean, that's a fair question coming back at me.
Because here, you get to think about it. I'm going to give you the tone to think about it within yourself. Here's what I think we're already running up against. Like when I hear that word identity, which again, same word, different
Mhm.
spins on the word. But why I think change and identity, after you said it, I've really been sitting here thinking like this is the number one reason that people self-sabotage. So the reason that I think self-sabotage happens is because my external world is changing more than my internal world. So I will do whatever I need to do to ensure that those two worlds are in alignment.
Mhm.
So if I have this belief system that says I am poor, even if you gave me $1 million, I wouldn't keep it, or I would spend it, or I would hide it, or I would do something. Why? Because actually my internal world is not in alignment with what you just gave me. So I will sabotage it in order for it to confirm whatever it is that I believe.
Mhm.
And so I think that even though I could want to be rich, or I could want to be in a connected marriage, or I could want to be a day trader, it doesn't matter what I want. It matters what I believe internally.
Mhm.
And so all of us can say, I want to change, but if I have not changed my internal world or my internal narrative, it doesn't matter how bad you want it externally. It matters how much you change it internally.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So when I hear you say that word identity, I'm like, oh my gosh, now I want someone to ask me, who are you when you walk into a room? And because you're like, outside of the labels, outside of the titles, outside of what you want me to say, outside of like my belief now, what I want to believe, like it just kind of feels like,
no, that's
what would we say if someone didn't
so I got
care?
it. I got it.
Okay.
I got it. This is me. I think this is me. I am a truth-seeking adventurer.
Oh my gosh.
That's who I am.
Trav.
So it's not like you're right. Because the first thing, what do you do? And your identity ties around that.
Mhm.
But if I really think about it, what makes me come alive is I want truth, which, being a believer is like, that is truth. I want truth out of people. I want truth out of myself.
Mhm.
And I love adventure.
Mhm.
Like the world is meant to go explore. And so that's who I am.
Dude.
So who
Travis,
are you?
look at Travis
Who are
is
you?
a truth-seeking adventurer right there. We want to know in the chat. We want to know, who are you?
Not what you do.
Not what you do. I want to know, who are you?
Who are you?
Oh, I am okay. This is so fun. Can you talk for just a second?
Yeah,
Can you tell
I'm
a
trying
story?
to think of the topic that we're talking about relative
It's change.
to
One
is
ending.
change. So
One
this
begin. Tell me your favorite thing about Arkansas. Do something. Give me 10 seconds to think
So
about
I'll
this.
tell you about Arkansas real quick. So Arkansas is overall has been a really good place. It's got amazing mountain biking trails. It's very family friendly. It's got parks and museums and trampoline parks, all the things within 10 to 15 minutes for a family. It's a safe place. It's a clean place. So overall, I would say Arkansas, Bentonville has been a good experience. What I would say is it a great place? And for me to define great place, I would have to throw some mountains in there.
We'd have to pepper in a few mountains that are bigger than hills.
And maybe ocean or something. But no, I think for me, my heart is like the mountains and being closer to the mountains. And there's nothing within mountain wise, like 8 hours. And so that's been probably the biggest challenge for me so far, being in Bentonville. But everything else, like, it's hard to complain about living here.
Yeah.
Like, it really is.
Yeah.
It's the weather thus far has been good, mild. It, got a little hot in the summer, but not like Florida. And then the winters are more mild, and we're going through that right now. So overall, if you're looking for a good, safe, clean, family-friendly place, Bentonville, Arkansas could be for you. And you don't mind not having the mountains or the ocean, this is it.
It's a solid choice.
Cost of living is pretty good too.
It's amazing.
Below the median, I would say.
This is not even a travel podcast. It would be.
No, I'm trying. Come on. Did you think
I can. So Julia is look. I'm even being prompted. Julia is oh my gosh, this is so fun. So I might have to come back next episode. But what came to me immediately is I feel like I am a walking truth bomb creative that's singing heaven's song. Meaning, I feel like I drop bombs of truth. And sometimes they roll out of my mouth that I did not think about that. You know how we've talked about that? When you thought about an idea, but sometimes you open your mouth and you're like, that was a bomb that did not come from me.
Mm-hmm.
That splatters this ability, like this truth bomb creative that can do things, that makes things come alive and like bring heaven's realities to earth. I feel like that's what I do.
I think that's good. I think this is a good practice that if you can weed it down, almost like what we've done in the past, where it's like you have, I love all the ideas. And
what would you have said? I would have said.
I'd
be curious.
I was so trying to think about Bentonville and Stalin a little bit. I wasn't thinking about anything about you, to be honest with you. So
yours
I don't know.
So good.
So I think we can give it some more time. I think that's in line with. But I think if you were to write down the keywords and phrases and stuff outside of, work and all mom and all that, like who is that deep down inside? I think you're close.
Yeah.
I think there's a few shifts where it's like shorten it up and like you could like a hook, you could tell someone and they're like, wow, that's.
I'm gonna work on that in between now and then.
Awesome.
I'm gonna work on that. So what would you say, Travis, to the person who has been avoiding change, to the person who's resisting, one chapter closing and another one opening? And I think especially if we're even looking at the world, we're not going to get too globally affared by any means, but there's a lot of changes happening.
Mm-hmm.
Always has been, always will be. But what do you say to the person who is at that crossroads of end is near and new is beginning? And what would you say to that person?
I think until you change, you won't get different results, and you have to embrace it. And you may change and realize that change is not what you want. And that's why us personally, we've moved all over the country. We've traveled in an RV full time to understand like what do we want? We're looking for a commitment to settle down. But through this process, we're identifying all the things that we want and the change of having mountains, no mountains, whether it's, we lived in Phoenix and it's been 115 degrees. And so I think if you want change, true change in your life, one, you have to obviously step into that change, but then be okay if once you experience it, if it's not what you thought it was going to be, and to change, be okay with changing again. Mm-hmm. And I think that we've done a good job of doing that. Yeah. And whether it was in real estate and trying 3 or 4 or 5 different facets of real estate investing to then find what worked for me. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's fitness, there's different diets out there. I would say a lot of them are fad diets that don't work, but you have to change and adjust and see how it feels for you. Because if you won't stick with something fitness wise, then you're not going to get the results, because it is a diet that's going to, you'll last for 90 days or 6 months. And then you'll have that yo-yo of gain weight, lose weight, gain weight, lose weight. You've got to find something that the foods you like, the workouts that you like, that you can make it a new lifestyle. Mm-hmm. But you have to be willing to adjust and change. And we've done that for the last 20 years of like trying different workouts and foods, and we're dialing it in to the point where now we don't even think about it. Mm-hmm. It's become second nature. Yeah. And we're still tweaking and, here and there, but it's been a long process, and you've also got to embrace the process. Yeah. Like anything worthwhile. There's a quote, the hardest climb, the best views come from the hardest climbs. Mm-hmm. And it is true. So see the mountain, pick the mountain, start climbing up it. And then, but also make sure that that's the hard that you want, that we talk about that all the time, like pick your hard, but also know there's going to be switchbacks on it.
Yeah.
There's going to be ups and downs on it before you get to where you want to be. So you've got to embrace and enjoy the journey.
Yeah, which I think is part of back to both of even our interpretations around that word, which is I think the power of change really comes into play when you recognize that it has less to do with skill set and more to do with that mindset and heart set, of like, who do I have to become so that the result I want is just a byproduct of who I became. And then recognizing that, to my point of it being a challenge, who said the pressure wasn't a privilege? Who says that the challenge was a bad thing? Who said that hard was bad? We say that to our kids all the time. And even today, Aslan was like, well, this is hard. And I just looked right at her and I was like, who said hard was bad? And immediately she was like, everybody, it was like she had this look on her eyes.
I do right now in this moment.
I don't like it.
I don't like hard.
But I think that that's what it's so easy to say, is that the change, it forces your hand on things, and it forces your beliefs on things. And I think that it's being equipped just with this mindset and heart set that, it's, even Jesus says that in this world you will have trials and you will have tribulations, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And I think that scripture has been everything to me, because it's anchored me into two things. Number one, it says take heart, which means take your heart to God. Don't take your heart to resources. Don't take your heart to the hiding places called alcohol or food or all the other places. Like, take your heart to God. I have overcome the world, which means he started with the end and why. So to your point, like, I think what helps us through hard changes or change in general is I need to have the end in mind. I need to have the top of that mountain in mind. And then I have to realize that daily I have to take my heart to the Lord. I have to take my heart to God and realize that it's in that exchange of, hey, my heart is brokenhearted, or my heart is scared, or my heart is full of fear, that it says that he will exchange, a heart of fear for a heart of love, a heart of regret for a heart of peace, a heart of shame for a heart of truth. And I think that we forget to do that.
Yep. This is so good if you really think about this, how it's going to change. So when Aslan says this is hard, we can now ask her, what does hard mean to you? Because hard to her means something totally different than you. So whether you're talking to your kids, your spouse, or in a business meeting, and you're said there's going to be some changes, and ask people, what does change mean to you? To have, so you understand, they could have trauma. They could have, different interpretation and experience through that, where they're like, no, I can't handle any more change in my life. But this is so good. If you really think about this. So when we say now words to each other, I need to ask you, because I think just the word change means something totally different to us. So when we're talking about words, or when the kids are saying something, I want to understand why they're saying that word and what the meaning is behind it. So we can help them either understand their meaning, or we can help them with their meaning.
Yeah, which is exactly Mark Twain. It's not what we know that hurts us. It's what we think we know that just isn't so.
Yep.
I think that's huge.
Yeah, because hard is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the lines, most people use it as like, I want to avoid hard. I don't want to do hard things. And we're like, well, pick your hard. Yeah. Like you want hard to grow. Yeah. If you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah. Oh, and that's where we'll land, ladies and gentlemen. If you're not growing, you're dying. And then, of course, don't forget to sit down with those that you love, that are in your work environment, your home, your kids, your spouse. And when you're talking about this topic of change, maybe just give a little bit of margin and ask, what does change mean to you? And how can you actually do the hard? How can you not even do the hard? How can you change well together?
Yeah, because then you're like, well, what does hard mean to you? What does this mean to you?
What does this mean to you? You're going to open up a can of worms is what we're saying, but that it's better a can of worms than no can of worms at all.
Until next time, we appreciate you joining us. Dream on.